In the world of rock and roll, Neil Young is one of the few people who always says what he thinks. The man from Canada who wrote Heart of Gold and Rockin' in the Free World never holds back when talking about music. Neil Young became famous for his voice and rough guitar playing, and also for being honest about what he believes in even if it gets him into trouble. Neil Young has always been willing to speak his mind no matter what happens next. Welcome to Rock's Controversial Takes. This is where we look at the side of Neil Young's musical relationships. Neil Young is the man who once said, "It's better to burn out than to fade away." He expected the same from the musicians he worked with. Not every musician was good enough for Neil Young. Neil Young believed that music should come from the heart. He did not think music should come from a meeting where people talk about how to sell it. Neil Young wanted music to be real. Neil Young does not like some musicians. He has shown this times. There have been fights backstage. He has said some pretty bad things about them in interviews. Neil Young would rather be true to himself than be popular. Here is a list of 6 musicians that Neil Young really does not like. Number 6, Billy Joel. When you think about Billy Joel, you think about the piano man. Billy Joel and Neil Young were both popular singers who wrote their own songs back in the early 1980s. Even though Billy Joel and Neil Young were similar, in some ways they were really different when it came to what they believed in. The problem between Billy Joel and Neil Young started because Neil Young did not like the way Billy Joel wrote his songs and became so successful. Music journalist Cameron Crowe said that Neil Young was especially annoyed that Billy Joel's song Uptown Girl was such a hit, while his own songs were not played on the radio as much because they were too different. Billy Joel's music was just not what Neil Young was making. That caused tension between Billy Joel and Neil Young. Neil Young did not like Joel. He thought Joel was everything that was bad about the music business. Young said Joel's music was like something that was made to sound good, but it did not mean anything. What really bothered Young was that Joel was so good at making music that sounded perfect. It did not say anything important. Young said Joel's songs were like furniture. They were made very well, but they did not have any feeling. Neil Young thought Joel's music was missing something. It was missing a soul. The bad feelings between them supposedly got really bad at an event in the music business in 1985. This is when Joel went up to Young and said they should work together on a song. Young was not very nice about it and said, "I do not do jingles." To Young, Joel's music was like something you buy, not something that comes from a heart. Young felt that Joel's music was more about making money than about expressing himself through music. The music of Joel just did not feel like music to Young. Number 5, Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac, especially when Buckingham and Nicks were in the band, which was a deal in the mid-1970s to late 1970s. The problems that Young had with Fleetwood Mac started around the time they released the album Rumors in 1977. This album was a commercial success, but at the same time Young was having a hard time getting his own music played on the radio because it was not as easy to listen to. Young was unhappy because he thought Fleetwood Mac was using their problems to make money, which bothered him a lot. Neil Young had a problem with the way Fleetwood Mac made music in the studio. They wanted everything to be perfect and sound really good. Neil Young thought they were spending much time on this, and it was making the music sound fake. He liked music that sounded real and came from the heart. There was a time when both Neil Young and Fleetwood Mac were going to play at the festival in 1978. Neil Young did not want to be backstage at the time as Fleetwood Mac. He wanted his performance to be at a time. Neil Young was upset because Fleetwood Mac used to play the blues. Now they were playing pop music, and he thought they were doing it just to be famous. He thought they were not being true to themselves. We're only thinking about making money. Neil Young liked Fleetwood Mac when they played blues rock music. He did not like the pop music they were playing now. Number 4, the Eagles. They have this relaxed sound that is from California, and they sold a lot of records. This is what Neil Young did not like about rock music in the 1970s. The people who worked with Neil Young say he did not like the Eagles singing, which sounded too perfect, and their songs that were made to be played on the radio all the time. He also did not like that the Eagles wanted everything to be just right when they were recording their music. The Eagles and their music style were just not what Neil Young was about. Neil Young did not like the music of the Eagles. He thought it was like something you buy rather than something that comes from the heart. He said that trying to make everything perfect is not a thing because it is not real. The Eagles were offered a lot of money to play at festivals. Neil Young did not want to play at the same festivals as them. He even called them accountants one time. Neil Young did not just dislike their music, he also disliked what they stood for. He thought the Eagles made music that was safe and predictable music for people who do not really care about music. To Neil Young, the Eagles represented what was wrong with rock and roll. They made it safe and boring, took away the things that made it exciting, like the danger and unpredictability of the Eagles' music. Neil Young thought the Eagles were ruining rock and roll. Number 3. Genesis when Phil Collins was with the band. People say that Young did not like what the band was doing. He thought it was wrong for Genesis to stop making music and start making simple pop songs. Bob Ezrin, who produced music, said that Young was really upset when he saw Genesis make this change. Genesis was a band that used to make complex music, but then they started making music that was easier to listen to. What really got to Young was that Collins used drum machines and synthesizers. Young felt that these machines made the music sound fake. He said that Collins' music was sadness that had been messed around with by technology, so it sounded like something you would hear on a commercial. This whole thing came to a head around the time of Aid in 1985. Young did not want to use the dressing room that Collins had used. Young's problem was that he thought music should be real, not made by machines. He thought that Genesis was more interested in making money than in making music. Young felt that the band was sacrificing its vision for the sake of selling records, which is what Collins and Genesis were doing. Number 2. Journey, the band that makes rock music. They have a sound that's really catchy and everyone likes it. Neil Young does not like this kind of music. He thinks it is bad. This happened when Journey changed their music style. They used to make a kind of music, but then Steve Perry joined the band and they started making music that people can sing along to in big stadiums. Journey is the band that makes this kind of music, and Neil Young does not like Journey and their music. Neil Young did not like the way Journey sang their songs. He thought they sounded like they were cheering of singing. Neil Young also thought that Journey wrote songs that were too simple and tried to make people feel a way on purpose. He said they were writing phrases that people would remember easily than writing real songs. When Neil Young and Journey performed at the festivals, things got tense. Neil Young did not want to hear Journey songs playing before he went on stage. To Neil Young, Journey was more about putting on a show than actually connecting with the people who were listening to their music. He thought Journey was selling an experience rather than sharing something real with the people who liked their music. Neil Young preferred it when music was real and meant something than just being a big spectacle. Journey songs were not what Neil Young thought music should be. Number 1. Styx. This is the musical act that Neil Young really does not like. Styx has these performances with a lot of drama, and they make concept albums, which is something that Neil Young thinks is fake and too much. Neil Young started to dislike Styx when they began to have these big stage shows and use rock opera ideas, which made him think that rock music was becoming like a show you see while you eat dinner at a theater, and that is what Neil Young does not like about Styx. Young really did not like the grand illusion and the way the band performed on stage. He thought they were too focused on telling stories and wearing costumes instead of just playing music. Young made fun of the way the band members acted on stage and the way they based their shows around an idea. He thought this was because they did not think their songs were good enough to stand on their own. The problem between Young and the band got really bad when Young would not record music in a studio that Styx had used before. He said this was because the studio had been made bad by the overly serious style of progressive rock music that Styx played. Young did not want to be associated with the grand illusion or the band's style of music. For Neil Young, Styx represented the ultimate betrayal of rock and roll's essential honesty. They symbolized artifice over authenticity, spectacle over truth, and theater over emotion. Whether one agrees or disagrees with his harsh judgments, they reveal an artist with uncompromising standards who refused to separate music from integrity. Neil Young's controversial takes remain as raw and unfiltered as the music that made him a legend.